Of all the things I never, ever thought I'd see from Sargon of Akkad, unironically parroting Paul's ship posters was chief among them. And yet, on April 12th, Sargon published A Tale of Two Narratives #3, The Road to War, where he opined on the topic of the latest chemical attack in Syria and concluded with this scintillating gem of wisdom.
And this would be, in my opinion, the last-ditch attempt from the US deep state to enact regime change in the Middle East to oust one of the few remaining Russian allies in a plan that goes back to George Bush and the neocons. In my opinion, this is a false flag.
Yeah. Sargon, I've always admired your open-mindedness to others' opinions, your willingness to engage in cross-aisle debate, and your acceptance of fair criticism. I'm going to trust in those qualities of yours now to lay out some things you might not have considered yet, and I'm going to ask you to listen to me based on a very, very simple premise. When a man finds himself in accord with Russian state propaganda also accusing his own country of high crimes, it's time to slow down and reconsider. Still with me here? Good. I have a double major degree in journalism and political science, and I'm so conservative I club baby seals to death with other baby seals. So I completely understand why you're approaching this from the angle of media narratives. I've written extensively on this sort of thing myself. So I can tell you that just because the media is spinning facts doesn't mean the only facts that matter are the ones they're currently spinning. Remember that journalists are idiots, and they frequently issue research. Witness the fucking bayonet chainsaw incident. So it's entirely possible for them to remain completely ignorant of significant detail that change the whole game. Case in point, in the April 7th attack, what chemicals were used? That chlorine was employed is apparently beyond doubt, but there's strong indications that a nerve agent was also used, based on the symptoms of the victims. As the Washington Post reports, the strongest evidence suggesting that chemicals were used in the attack comes from a few videos filmed in the aftermath of the event. Blah, blah, blah. There's a young child with foam at the nose and a boy with foam on its mouth. That's much, much more consistent with a nerve agent type exposure than chlorine, unquote. It seems the Pentagon and the Trump administration consider this information solid. As CNN reports, while the available information is much greater on the chlorine use, we do have significant information that also points to sarin use. A senior administration official said on a call with reporters, citing reports from media, non-governmental organizations, and other open sources. They do point to meiosis, constricted pupils, convulsions, and disruptions to the central nervous systems. Those symptoms don't come from chlorine. More significantly, there seems to be some early physical evidence found in blood and urine samples from victims undergoing treatment, a story NBC News broke. The sample suggests the presence of both chlorine gas and an unnamed nerve agent, two officials said. Typically, such samples are obtained through hospitals and collected by U.S. or foreign intelligence assets on the ground. The officials said they were confident in the intelligence, though not 100% sure, unquote. Usually, these pronouncements come from the mysterious and imperial official, who sneaks into reporters' homes at night to slip written statements under their pillow before vanishing whence he came. But not this time. A senior administration official said on a call with reporters, plural, is a lot stronger than CNN's usual anonymous asshole familiar with the matter bullshit. And the NBC report has two anonymous assholes echoing each other in addition to actually sounding like intelligence sources speaking off the record. For instance, and an unnamed nerve agent. That's what you'd expect from a secondhand body fluid analysis. All nerve agents are nerve agents. They all kill via the same mechanism, so they're all going to leave the same basic telltales in a victim's bodily fluids. They won't stand up and scream, "I was mixed with a spatula in Assad's bathtub," which is what I would expect to hear if I was being fed a line of bullshit. It's also consistent with the non-committal reply offered by SecDef Mattis in the initial April 13th post-strike press conference. We are very much aware of one of the agents. There may have been more than one agent used. We are not clear on that yet. We know at least one chemical agent was used. And a little later he says, yes, we're very confident that chlorine was used. We are not ruling out sarin right now. This combination of official neutrality, all but official leaks via conference calls with multiple reporters, and intelligence officers disclosing early physical evidence all points to an administration that's pretty damn sure sarin was used, but can't publicly out their intelligence sources. As Pentagon spokeswoman Dana White said during the Saturday morning post-strike press conference, this has a lot to do with intelligence. Open source intelligence, or OSINT, is a massive part of any intel gathering apparatus, but you bullshit check it with classified sources like spies on the ground and signals intelligence, such as this other leak to CNN from a senior administration official describing some intercepted phone calls between parties of interest. SIGINT like this isn't necessarily a recording of someone talking Assad through mixing sarin in his bathtub. It could be as simple as detecting fully encrypted communications between known units, such as a flurry of chatter between the Barza chemical facility and a known chemical weapons unit, for instance. SIGINT keeps track of these over time and slowly builds up patterns of behavior. So if those patterns match, your spies on the ground confirm the eyewitness reports, and early physical samples from victims corroborate all the above, well, quacks like a duck, etc. But you can't openly disclose this evidence without giving away crucial info like how extensive your spy network in country is that actually collected those samples. And even though everyone knows the NSA listens to everything, that's just one part of the puzzle. Telling people Assad bought a shower curtain doesn't mean jack shit till you can prove that he also bought a hatchet and a mop. The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, which has sent experts to investigate prior chemical attacks in Syria, is on the ground as I type this, so they may as well wait for solid third-party evidence. Or they could just wait for Russia to all but confirm sarin was used by blocking the OPCW from... And there it is. Now, I'll remind you that journalists rarely lie themselves. They just quote someone that lies for them. This is prevalent enough that one of my journalism professors at school actually mentioned it as a common failing of young journalism students, that they make the mistake of thinking it's okay as long as they only quote people that agree with them. I just allege that in the last couple of years it has accelerated to deliberately quoting people they damn well know are lying because it pushes their narrative. And that's especially what they've done with Trump, uncritically parroting any bullshit claim as long as it pushes the narrative they seek. And if you look at these articles, you'll see they're no exception. The ABC story states the Assad regime is known to have stocks of the nerve agent sarin. Or this loose speculation at the bottom of the WAPO article about a sarin-chlorine mix being difficult and complicated immediately juxtaposed as White House speculation on Assad's experimenting with new weapons. I think you'll agree with me, Sargon, that this is the exact kind of lazy insinuation journalists usually rely on to push their bullshit. They want Assad bombed, as you agree, so they just say sarin was used, Assad has sarin, ergo Assad in the drawing room with gas. And this is why establishment media journalists are stupid. They didn't ask why the Trump administration would undertake so many obviously approved leaks. Again, reporters in a fucking conference call? Why they would do this if it didn't help Trump somehow. The usual fuckwits have been whining for days before that Friday 13th strike that Trump waited too long and all of Syria's goodies had long since been spirited away to safety in the night. Except sarin stockpiles can't be spirited away in the night because sarin can't be stockpiled. Sarin has a shelf life of months at best, and if you're using shit-quality chemicals, say, like Syria buying off the black market, it might only last weeks. Advanced weapons made by the US and Russia actually mixed their precursors in flight as part of the arming process of the weapon, a level of sophistication that's well beyond what barrel bomb Assad's people are capable of right now. Since you can't stockpile it, you've got to make everything you'll need in a short time frame all at once. And worse, this requires an actual lab. You cannot make sarin in your fucking kitchen. The last asshole to suggest this was Seymour Hersh, and he was corrected by Dan Cazeta, a former officer in the U.S. Army Chemical Corps and expert with the Secret Service. His op-ed for Bloomberg is paywalled, but this War in Context article titled How Easy Is It to Make Sarin quotes Mr. Cazeta liberally. Even if the precursors are obtainable, anyone trying to make sarin in an at-home lab would face a challenge because in many ways the ingredients are more dangerous than the final product. An intermediate step in the production, for example, requires the use of hydrogen fluoride gas at high temperature. Hydrogen fluoride is nasty stuff, and a lot of it is needed to make sarin. Even in its more stable liquid form, the smallest leak would destroy all the chemistry equipment and almost everything else in a modern kitchen. Anyone trying to combine these ingredients may kill or seriously harm themselves and anyone nearby. From another War and Context article titled Why Seymour Hersh Got It Wrong This Time, Mr. Cazeta says this. The practical reality of chemical warfare is that it is far less efficient in terms of amount of material required than most laymen understand. Numerous casualties over a large area require a large amount of material. A lot of sarin was used. My own attempts to apply Cold War-era methodologies to reverse engineer the attack gave me a rough range of sarin from 370 kilograms to 4,400 kilograms of sarin. Although my methods are too lengthy to state here, my best guess is that the real answer is somewhere in the middle of this range, perhaps a ton. Compare that to the note in the prior article about a Japanese cult which made sarin that they later used in the infamous Tokyo subway gas attack. A $13 million production facility with 3 stories, staffed by workers with chemistry expertise, could produce all of 2 fucking gallons of sarin per batch. So, unlike chlorine gas, which you can mix in a bucket with ingredients from the fucking pool store, a viable military sarin capability requires having a big-ass lab full of heavy, expensive equipment that you can't just move and hide on a moment's notice. A lot like that huge Barza facility the United States just blew the ever-loving hell out of on Friday 13th. The Pentagon didn't forget the cocksuckers whining that last year's Tomahawk strike only vaporized 20% of Syria's operational aircraft. Instead of blowing a hole in the runway they patch in a day for $50 worth of fucking concrete. This time Trump's Pentagon came to the PR cockjousting session greased up and fully erect. So it's a tale of two narratives. It all makes sense, all is right with the world and wonky in Washington, except it does make you wonder. If you can't stockpile sarin, and you need a huge-ass lab to make useful amounts, how in the name of fuck would rebels get their hands on it for a false flag attack? Indeed, where did the sarin come from for the 2013 Ghouta chemical attack? You know, the one that the UN's weapons inspectors unambiguously confirmed involved sarin? That's the big hairy gorilla problem in this room. The one you missed because you were focused on engaging with media narratives written by people who were blind themselves. But it's not why I made this video. Aside from a tunnel vision effect being understandable, we should have a definitive answer within a week on sarin usage, and I personally consider Russian efforts to impede the investigation to be answer enough. I made this video because you should have damn well seen that gorilla, Sargon. There were multiple times in the making of that video where someone of your intellect and demonstrated discipline should have stopped and asked yourself just what the fuck you were saying. When you find yourself quoting a Russian state propaganda outlet like Sputnik before uttering the words a false flag attack by the deep state, Jesus Christ, man, you should have seen the gorilla. And you didn't, and I think I know why. The trouble starts right here. Note the date, where your own source established that Jaish al-Islam, the last holdout rebel group in the area, surrendered and evacuated on April 8th, the day after the chemical attack in question. It's almost like the chronological relationship here suggests a causal relationship? And then, most astoundingly, you've got the statue brass balls to throw this shit out there.
The Syrian government has won the civil war. There would be no tactical benefit for them to commit a chemical attack at this point, or indeed at any point in the previous 7 years of this conflict.
No tactical benefit, you say. At any point in this 7-year-long civil war, this brutal, grueling civil war, even back when Assad's regime was losing and it was fighting for its life, as recently as 2015, when they were getting pushed back on all fronts, ISIS had whipped their asses out of Palermo and Assad was struggling to find replacement troops. At no fucking point did they find a tactical benefit in a weapon a few orders of magnitude more effective than conventional weapons, especially when tackling heavily fortified buildings in the inner city. At no point. Please explain to me how this statement makes a lick of logical sense, because I cannot comprehend how someone with your demonstrated intelligence could utter it. And before you hold forth on tactical benefits, it might help if you knew something about modern urban combat against insurgents. This write-up, complete with visuals, describes how insurgents can, and in places like Fallujah did, turn large apartment buildings into fortresses, protected by internal bunkers, firing out of loopholes that blend in with windows and decoy loopholes, and supported by nearby strong points that put down a hideous crossfire. Once you get close, you'll find stairways and halls blocked that funnel you into kill zones guarded by a second internal bunker. Some in Fallujah were made with Jersey barriers, those concrete walls that divide the highway. And when you get past that, you get to trip over booby traps while the cocksuckers slip out the back door, run to another fortified strong point, and you get to do the whole goddamn rigmarole all over again. The traditional solution is to bring in tanks for direct fire suppression, but as this war is boring article notes, the Syrian army is a garrison force best suited to static defense in depth and has limited real-world maneuver, combined arms, and joint warfare training, meaning tanks were meant to sit in one spot and fire on an attacking enemy, and they weren't combined with foot soldiers, an essential tactic in urban fighting where the tanks need the infantry's protection and the infantry needs the tank's firepower. Exacerbating this is the large number of T-55s that make up the bulk of Assad's armored forces. An old tank that's easily penetrated by the standard warhead of the RPG-7. And the RPG-7 is infamously common in the Middle East, which means the Syrian army taking tanks into the city usually ends like this, or this, or this. And artillery won't help you either, as evidenced by the Battle of the Somme, where British artillery fired 1.5 million shells over 5 days of non-stop bombardment and still couldn't dig the Germans out of their trenches. And as the private intel agency Janes notes, the Russians are mostly using dumb bombs in Syria, likely because they can't afford that many precision-guided ones, and the numbers they need to systematically level buildings in built-up areas are simply prohibitive. Even the United States and our seemingly bottomless defense budget is running short on PGMs these days. But gas. Now gas, especially if you drop it on the roof of a building, as eyewitnesses said happened on April 7th, gas can infiltrate through the ventilation and cracks and very quickly kill everyone inside a heavily fortified building that can only otherwise be taken in grueling close-quarters combat by an army poorly trained for it and with none of the weapons required. That's the situation Assad's in. Sarin and chlorine are both heavier than air. They sink into the building. Chlorine's only dangerous when inhaled, but sarin is lethal on contact. So the fighters smell chlorine, pull on their gas masks, which aren't hard to buy off the shelf these days, and by the time they figure out how they should have run, they're already dead. Dumb bombs dropped with the aid of a bombing computer can have a circular error probable of as low as 10 meters, comparable to some GPS-guided weapons. If you press the attack really close, like you're glide bombing in a World War II aircraft. Same weapons, same tactics, just with an aimbot assist. And that's not the brightest idea when one of the most common weapons in that part of the world is this bad boy, the ZSU-23-2 double-barreled 23mm anti-aircraft cannon, more often seen riding on a jury-rigged Toyota Helix. And that's to say nothing of all the North Korean-made shoulder-launched anti-aircraft missiles floating around Syria these days. Plus, you gotta fly more or less directly at the target, giving every asshole with an AK-47, or God forbid something larger, the easiest possible target. This is probably why the Russians are dropping dumb bombs from medium altitude against softer targets. They're not going to risk their expensive jets for Assad. Syria's not going to risk their handful of Su-24s, their pride and joy. And the Su-17s, that are the Syrian Air Force's mainstay attack aircraft, they're old as shit. They don't have a constantly computed impact point bomb sight that I know of. Riding a Hip 8 chopper in is even riskier, but your door gunners can at least shoot back to suppress RPG teams. A helo is far less valuable, and the Russians are more willing to replace them because of it. And above all, it only takes one successful sortie to guaranteed kill every son of a bitch in the building. Gas is hands down the most efficient option the Syrian army has for clearing large building strongpoints without taking casualties. And keeping his forces alive is probably really important to Assad right now, because the Syrian government has not won this civil war, as any asshole can tell by looking at the fucking map. This is the Syrian live map. You see all that yellow on the right that runs up and down the river Euphrates, where a good number of Syria's most valuable oil fields are located? That's half of all the territory in Syria worth holding. And considering that Russian troops in disguise, the so-called mercenaries of the Wagner Group, were attacking one of those oil fields when U.S. forces slaughtered them, I'd say it's pretty fucking clear that neither Assad nor his patron Russia are happy with half of Syria being the new status quo. After 7 years of fighting, the Syrian government has finally managed to drive the rebels out of a suburb of its own capital city, with one half the country still under foreign-sponsored rebel occupation. Assad hasn't won shit. He clearly doesn't want to admit that he'll never take back eastern Syria, and he's still got enemies to fight right in his own backyard, as the map shows. He's going to need those troops, and so he's got plenty of incentive to save them for future battles by any means necessary. I don't expect you to be an expert in military affairs, Sargon, but I do expect you to read the fucking map! And finally, I'll quote Melissa Dalton of the Center for Strategic and International Studies. This latest attack fits a repeated pattern. When the international community, particularly the United States, seems distracted or indicates its intent to pull back, the Syrian regime feels emboldened to seek battlefield gains through chemical attacks. Why does Assad's regime do this? Because it works. It is a deliberate move by the regime to coerce and depopulate opposition-controlled areas, along with industrial-scale conventional force against Syrian civilians. By targeting the Douma suburb outside of Damascus, Assad is eliminating a near threat to the capital and sending a signal to other remaining opposition-held pockets that they are next. Note the attack came mere days after Trump publicly said he wanted to get out of Syria soon. Also note that chemical attacks have been frequent and ongoing, which is why the UK's government was making noise about joining a possible US punitive strike due to chemical weapons usage against civilians on February 27th, well before the attack. And France's president laid down his own red line months ago. Assad makes regular use of chemical weapons whenever he thinks he can get away with it, many with sarin involved. The Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Syrian Arab Republic, a United Nations commission, pegged the number at 34 confirmed attacks. Nobody, but nobody, was surprised by this attack except, apparently, you. And the cherry on this shit sundae is your magnum opus. Your big finish.
In my opinion, this is being used as a pretext for war.
So, the punitive strikes occurred on Friday the 13th, and Wouldn't you know it, they gave a war and nobody came. No paratroopers dropping on Damascus, no tanks rolling through Aleppo, no beach landings at Tartus and Latakia, no mass draft of young American boys being sent off to war. It's almost like an act of war doesn't equal an actual war, which is a good thing, because if they did, the capture of the USS Pueblo, the axe murder incident, the shoot down of Deep Sea 129, the sinking of ROKS Cheowan, and the bombardment of Yeonpyeong Island should have started the Second Korean War 5 times over by now. Sargon, I love what you do. You're the first YouTuber I actually subscribed to and came back to watch time and time again. I love how you're taking the fight to the smelly dumb SJW scum. I really do. But I'd like you to consider for a moment that on this particular issue, you've let your personal biases color your judgment. That's what I think happened here. That's what I hope happened, because what you did in that video, false flag attack, is what shit posters on Paul are shouting as we speak, in the same breath that they name the Jew and complain about Trump sending us to die for Israel. And then I come to your channel to listen to someone I admire and respect, and I hear the same fucking shit out of your mouth. Russia Today and Sputnik are both mouthpieces of Putin's authoritarian government. Speaking of, what you said in that video sounds pretty fucking familiar to me. Let's see. Every single rebel group is evil jihadist scum. Anyone who accuses Russians or the Syrian government of doing anything bad is a jihadist. America is secretly supporting ISIS, i.e. the jihadists. And above all, every accusation of evil and wrongdoing is all part of an elaborate scheme by the Western powers that be to undermine righteous Rodina. I suggest you look up Maskarovka, the doctrine of Russian strategic deception, so you can understand what you are helping to promote here. And then you can look up Maxim Borodin, a Russian journalist who was murdered on the day I wrote this fucking script. Supposedly fell off his balcony for reporting the truth too much. And then you can go to Wikipedia and look up the long list of Russian journalists that were murdered before him. These are the people you disrespect when you quote that fucking propaganda outlet to your 800,000 fucking followers. You know better, Sargon. You fucking know better. And you have a responsibility to your viewers to not regurgitate this shit without thinking about it first. After watching your Okinawa is an American colony video, I have a rough idea how you feel about the United States and military action, but now your claims stand in opposition to the intelligence summaries of the United States, the United Kingdom, and France. You've let war wariness bloom into full-out fucking paranoia, and in the process you've apparently swallowed Russian propaganda hook, line, and Sputnik. I've recommended you to people. I've recommended your videos to people. I've recommended you as a middle-of-the-road thinker who articulates his views evenly and backs them up as research, as somebody that can bridge the divide between conservatives and what liberals still remain on the American Democratic Party. And you've made a goddamn fool of me, Sargon. Wake up. Put down the fucking red pills and go find some intelligent people that disagree with you on this to talk to before you make another hot take like this last video. And if you can't be arsed to do that, that's fine. I get it. It's not your usual ballywick. But in that case, do us all a favor and stay in your fucking lane!